Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and I trust you had a great weekend. I've got a lot of people to thank. I'd like to thank the Swedish ambassador Johan Bogstam for the invitation on Friday night to celebrate the Swedish National Day. Very nice garden he's got there too, and I'll put up a photograph of a selfie of His Excellency Katrina Manson of the FT and myself. I'd like to thank His Excellency Joost Rentjes, the Dutch ambassador to Kenya, for the opportunity to speak to his people on Saturday, and that was most enjoyable as well. And finally, I wish to bid farewell to His Excellency Mr. Gil Haskell and Mrs. Dalit Haskell, and thank both of them for the invitation Saturday to their farewell party. They're going back to Israel. And finally, if you haven't seen that interview I did with Koki Mutungi, the first female African pilot of a Boeing Dreamliner, then please have a look. That link is on the front page of the website and under Rich Wrap-Ups, Home Thoughts, going back to Don DeLillo with the events in Karachi and elsewhere. I used to think it was possible for an artist to alter the inner life of the culture. Now bomb makers and gunmen have taken that territory. I put up that photograph I liked of the Maputo evening that I took outside the Radisson Blu when I was there not too long ago. Political reflections. Sisi is sworn in as Egypt's president and said in his first speech to the nation on Sunday that he will focus on fighting terrorism in the coming phase. Defeating terrorism and achieving security is the top priority in our coming phase, said Sisi. The CIA has turned up on Twitter, and their first tweet reads, "We can neither confirm nor deny that this is our first tweet." Apparently, according to Bloomberg, the US will hold direct talks with Iran this week. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed the talks and announced separate meetings with Russian officials to be held June 11, June 12 in Rome. US-Iran talks take place a week before six powers, including the US-Russia, are scheduled to convene another round of international negotiations with Iran on June 16 in Vienna. US-Iran direct talks led to a breakthrough last year that made possible a temporary accord freezing parts of Iran's nuclear program, and direct, in-depth, substantive talks are the only way to know if a final deal will be possible. I wrote about this last year when I wrote about the two Husseins, Barack Hussein Obama and Hassan Rouhani, and I said, the recent rapprochement between President Obama and President Rouhani has certainly snapped a losing sequence in US-Iran relations that goes all the way back to the Iranian Revolution in 1979, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. The Shah was the second and last monarch of the House of Pahlavi, otherwise known as the Peacock Throne. Barack Hussein Obama and Hassan Rouhani share the same name, as did the Prophet Muhammad's revered grandsons. Those who pursue the study of anthroponymy, which is the study of personal names, especially in the Islamic world, probably view this as very fortuitous. From there I jumped to Weiwei's What's in a Name? A name is the first and final marker of individual rights, one fixed part of the ever-changing human world. A name is the most basic characteristic of our human rights, no matter how poor or how rich. All living people have a name, and it is endowed with good wishes and the expectant blessings of kindness and virtue. I said then Hussein and Hassan are going to have to cut through a great deal of interference in this situation. There are powerful vested interests fully invested in the status quo. What has subsequently changed, in my view, is the pivot to Ukraine and Russia, the Europeans' dependency on Russian gas, and the fact that Iranian gas might well prove the backstop for Europe. And I think that essentially reshuffles the decks in Iran's favor. I put up a photograph of President Hassan Rouhani. I came across this in the Independent. Europeans have not yet woken up to the significance of these anarchic zones opening up on the shores of the Mediterranean in Syria and Libya. And then another report in the FT saying this is the top issue now with EU relations with Turkey. Each member state has a terror watch list. All roads lead to the Turkish Foreign Ministry. Gilles de Kerchove, the EU's top counter-terrorism official, confirmed that a group of some European countries was working extremely closely together to share information. They have had meetings with Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia and Turkey, he said. For them it is Syria, 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 Syria. Mr. de Kerchove told the FT earlier this week that Europe should brace itself for more attacks. And curiously, this was entirely the argument that Bashar made, in point of fact. Outstanding speech delivered by Christine Lagarde, the Amartya Sen lecture, all about empowerment. And she says, tonight the topic I want to talk about sits at the intersection of justice and economics. The issue of empowerment. Empowerment is about economic opportunity, the ability to freely choose one's own path in life in accordance with one's distinctive talents and abilities. It's about cutting away obstacles to true human flourishing. I want to address three distinct layers of empowerment. The empowerment of the individual, which is key. Second, what is needed to help individual empowerment, the empowerment of institutions. Third, what is needed in turn to help national economies flourish, the empowerment of multilateralism. And I think that's a key point. She then she says, as one final example, let me turn to sub-Saharan Africa. Just last week, we held a major conference in Mozambique on the theme of Africa Rising, which is really one of the great, if underappreciated, stories of our time. Many African countries are blessed with a bounty of natural resources, but as we know only too well, this blessing can too easily become a curse. So it is vitally important to put in place strong fiscal regimes to manage resource revenues for the benefit of this generation and generations to come. This was a key theme at the conference, and we're providing assistance in this area to countries like Kenya, Mozambique and Tanzania. Then she's talking about the empowerment of multilateralism. In a very basic way, today's challenges are increasingly global challenges. Empowerment today depends not just on what is happening in your own country, but what is happening in the wider world. We live in a world that is simultaneously coming together and drifting further apart, coming together due to the dense and intricate web of interconnections that run through our global economy and trade, finance, communications, coming apart due to the increasing diffusion of power across the world toward more diverse geographical regions and more diverse global stakeholders, a more tribal mentality, she says. If we are not careful, this tension between integration and fragmentation could lead to indecision, impasse and insecurity. I think it's a great speech, well worth reading in full. The link for her MindSpeak session is up on Rich Wrap-Ups, and I'll put up a photograph of Hannah and Aisha meeting her, and she was very, very compelling. I'm going to put up a photograph of Bashar and Asma Assad voting in Damascus last week, and my, hasn't he proven sticky. Pakistani, I'll put up a photograph of Pakistani security personnel arriving at Jinnah International Airport in Karachi. There was an attack in the airport. I have been impressed at the eminent deniability of it all. This has been an exactly and beautifully calibrated operation, silent but deadly effective, said Jonathan Ayal. The West has been caught off guard from day one. In eastern Ukraine, it's much more specialist troops. It's a small number, a very small number. These sort of characters do their work and then disappear very quickly, leaving things to the militias to take over. points to examples of six-man groups armed with expensive Russian kit such as VSS Ventura's sniper rifles, wearing special forces camouflage, had been observed aiding rebels. Everybody looks at what is happening in East Ukraine and they think in terms of tanks and conventional military capabilities, but the Russian state has always invested heavily in the special services and the intelligence agencies. They are the ones involved here. We would describe it as an influence operation, said a senior NATO officer. Russia has very effectively employed all of the tools of power, information, diplomacy, politics, military might, both overt and unconventional and economic. With this in mind, it is ironic that for all of its accusations against Russia, it is NATO that is looking like it is stuck in the Iron Curtain era, as it tries to fly more planes, exercise more troops, and sail more ships ever closer to Russia. I still think the pivot to Asia is the main thrust, and as such the pivot to Russia-Ukraine is a distraction and an example of unnecessary overreach. It would have been far better to have kept Putin on side as the US pivoted to Asia, rather than thrust Putin into China's arms. In my opinion, international markets Eurobonds surge on ECB shockwaves. Spain's 10-year yields fell 22 basis points to 2.64%, least since Bloomberg began compiling the data in 1993. ECB measures included cutting the main refinancing rate to a record 0.15%, moving the deposit rate below zero, stoked gains in European bonds, which have surged as the region's debt crisis abated. Greece and Portugal led Euro region securities to a 6.1% return this year through June 5 versus 2.9% for treasuries. The rate on 10-year Italian debt fell 20 basis points in the week to 2.76% and set an all-time low of 2.723% yesterday. French bonds fell to 1.656%, the least since Bloomberg began compiling the data in 1990. So you've had a huge rally in the bond markets. Currency markets, the euro resilient, 136.45, last dollar index 80.41, Japanese yen 102.50, touched 102.80 on June 4, which was the weakest level for the yen since May the 2nd. GDP grew at an annualized 6.7% in the first 3 months of the year, considerably faster than the preliminary reading of 5.9%. Swiss franc 0.8934, the pound holding above 168 at 168.06. Aussie, that's rallied 1.1% during the past 2 weeks, now at 0.9353. India rupee 59.029. The Reserve Bank was spotted buying dollars via state-run banks, and they've been, I think, tempering the bullishness in the rupee. South Korean won 10.1980, touched 10.1697 earlier, which was the highest level since August 2008. Brazilian real 224.82, Egyptian pound 714.24, and the rand firm at 1058.25. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the euro dollar, and that is at 136.45 and trading with some resilience. I would say dollar index, we're off the highs, we're at 80.41. I'll put up a 1-month chart of the Aussie dollar. You can see that's had a nice run higher. Copper bets cut most in month as metal leads losers. Money managers trimmed their net long position by 24% to a 4-week low. A probe into inventories in China spurred speculation that imports by the biggest consuming nation will drop. ECB took unprecedented steps to combat deflation. Barclays anticipates that global supply will outpace demand from the fourth quarter. Prices are down 10% this year, the most among 24 commodities tracked by S&P's GSCI Spot Index. Copper futures fell 2.3% last week, and whither the copper price goes, so does Zambia. I'll put up a 6-month chart of the copper price. I think we break down below 3. Gold back above 1250, a little bit of a short covering rally. Don't see it holding for long. Maybe get up to 1260, 1270, but I think we're going lower again. Crude oil 102.82. and that's prices have advanced 4.5% this year. I think it trades rich, but obviously a lot to do with uncertainty in Iraq and Libya. Russian billionaire Andrew Melnichenko's super yacht A, I discovered on Bloomberg, $350 million yacht, and talking about the spend per person being significantly higher of these big boat owners that you'd expect. Came across a very interesting Al-Qaeda map via Twitter. I'll put that up. You can see from Afghanistan all the way to West Africa. They continue to spread out. Zambia, bond yields dropped to a record low as an IMF program is planned. An IMF team will return in September for more talks. The IMF is working closely with the Zambian authorities to develop a plan that will anchor macroeconomic stability. Steps in this direction would go a long way towards restoring confidence in the foreign exchange market. Yields on dollar debt due April 2024 dropped 52 basis points to 6.93%. The kwacha was 2.4% stronger. The announcement that the government is looking to formally engage with the IMF is very welcome, said Yvette Bab, whom I met in Maputo. The program will add substantial credibility to the fiscal policy environment. Zambia has started the process of formally engaging with the fund on a new program. I wrote about this on the 3rd of June when I said it's clear to me that the IMF has a role to play, not least because policymakers will make mistakes. Zambia and Ghana refer. And on the 28th of April, I wrote about how rising fiscal imbalances are the region's Achilles heel. I was also referencing a report, the economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa, that the IMF had released. South African all shares up 7.949% this year. Dollar rand, we've improved a little bit here to 10.5814. I still think we'll go to 10 before 11. Egyptian pound, stable here at 7.1430. Lots of support with the GCC, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The Egyptian stock market up 25.3022% this year, in Africa's best. Nigerian all share up 0.4839% this year. Came across this photograph in photo booth of Shago Sumula Alabo. He's being sprayed with money after a Dambi match in Lagos. This is boxing. Currency depreciated to 164.40, weakest since April 1. Nigeria's reserves dropped 16% this year to 36.7 billion as of June 4. A female suicide bomber hits Nigerian barracks, killed herself and a soldier outside an army barracks in the northeastern city of Gombe on Sunday. That insurgency carries on gaining traction. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 9.2307% this year, but of course you've lost most of those returns because of the weakness in the currency. You've lost that and more. I'll put up a diagram I saw of top exporters of fresh cut roses to the EU in 2012. DR Congo is being told to investigate attacks on oil project critics. The attack on the National Parks Director was a painful and shocking reminder that people working to protect Africa's oldest park, its habitat, wildlife and local communities do so at enormous risks, said Ida Sawyer, senior Congo researcher at Human Rights Watch. Congolese authorities need to make sure that those responsible for this attack and others are arrested and prosecuted. In the week following the attack on Merode, at least 3 human rights and environmental activists received threatening text messages from unidentified members. Human Rights Watch said one message said, "You are playing with fire, name of activists, you are going to burn your second leg. It's useless to change your car because we know all the cars and everywhere you go with your team. Don't believe that just because we failed to get your director, that we are going to fail to get you." Another message said, "You think that by writing you're going to prevent us from extracting oil." Saying that, the caller said, "We failed to get Merode, we won't fail to get you." Told the employer that if anyone told anyone about the calls, he would be dealt with. Park rangers and activists should be able to oppose oil exploration in Virunga Park without risking their lives. I'll put up a photograph of a lunch that His Excellency Bart Ouvry hosted, where de Merode was in fact the guest of honor. and he was a fascinating gentleman, so passionate, particularly about the guerrillas. I mean, it was amazing. My weekly piece is Barbarians at the Gates. Getting the money is easy. I came across the patrician and charming Michael Gondwe, the governor of the Central Bank of Zambia in Maputo. Zambia has found itself in the eye of a storm in 2014. Overnight interest rates have recently been hiked to 22%, and the currency has fallen up to 17% versus the dollar at its worst in 2014, and second only to the Ghana cedi, which is down over 20% in 2014. The IMF's arrival in Accra is predictable and imminent. The IMF said in April in a few cases policy missteps such as large fiscal imbalances threatened to undermine the hard-won macroeconomic gains of recent years that have supported growth. In addition, important homegrown risks arise from fiscal vulnerabilities in a number of countries such as Ghana and Zambia. As you can see, we live in a world where the clock speed keeps increasing, and here we are weeks later. Zambia and Ghana are important harbingers for ourselves as we load debt onto our balance sheet big time. One of my favorite films is Brian De Palma's Scarface. Al Pacino plays Tony Montana, a Cuban refugee who has landed in Miami in the 1980s. He starts working for a kingpin called Frank Lopez and is champing to go bigger. And Frank asks Tony how he's going to finance this expansion. Tony offers to help Frank come up with the first $5 million. You short a couple of mil, I go on the street for you, make some moves, a mil here, a mil there, you got it. And as our Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and his team make their moves, San Francisco and Los Angeles last week, and Boston, New York and London this week, ahead of a sale of what I expect to be $2 billion of a 10-year dollar-denominated Eurobond at an interest rate range of 6.95 to 7.45%. I estimate a 7% yield as a likely outcome given the recent backdrop of Africa's sovereign bond price action. News of IMF support sent Zambian yields to their lowest levels ever at 6.93%. Egyptian Eurobond yields tumbled to 4.73% last week, lowest level since December 2010, from a peak of 11.07% in June 2013. And essentially, Madame Christine Lagarde's IMF intervention in Zambia and the market response to Sisi have created a favourable moment for Kenya's issue. Returning to Kenya, besides this Eurobond, we have a very handsome overdraft with China as well. There is a lot of debt being placed on the balance sheet of Kenya Inc. Coincidentally, New York-based private equity giant KKR, best known for its $25 billion hostile takeover of American conglomerate RJR Nabisco in 1988, which was the subject of the book Barbarians at the Gate, The Fall of RJR Nabisco, closed their first African investment in Afriflora, an Ethiopian company that grows about 730 million roses a year for export to Europe. Neither China nor the international bond markets are Santa Claus. They are in fact the barbarians at the gate. When you draw down billions from the street, you have to pay the interest. We sit at an inflection point. To get from this point to the next will require faultless execution. Getting the money is the easy part. And I'll put up an image of barbarians at the gate, and then my favorite quote from Scarface, which is, "The world is yours." The World Bank will advance Kenya's 350 billion shillings, which is $4 billion in the next 5 years, for completion of projects aimed at accelerating growth and creating jobs. Kenya's shilling was last trading at 87.43 on the 26th of May, when it was trading above 88. I said, on balance and subject to security issues staying on the trend line, which is considerably elevated in 2014, then the shilling should improve from here as it is. Nairobi all shares up 9.279% in 2014, 2.1877% below a record high set on the 12th of May. NSE 20 is negative 1.60373%. Kenyan gunmen kill Australian businessman, and this story has hardly been reported here, but it's like a wildfire in Australia. Shot and killed an Australian media executive, the second such attack on an Australian citizen in the past year in the crime-ridden capital Nairobi. Kerry Eaton, a co-founder of the online marketplace One Africa Media, died of gunshot wounds in hospital on Thursday after he was attacked at a friend's house in an upmarket suburb the night before. The deceased was at a friend's party where 4 armed robbers appeared and demanded money. He was shot as he attempted to dash away from the scene. I met him not too long ago, and in my opinion the situation is one step away from a tipping point. The tipping point is that magic moment when an idea, trend or social behavior, insecurity, crosses a threshold, tips and spreads like wildfire. I wrote about this on the 19th of May when I said the dashboard is blinking amber, and I was referring to Kenya. I said, look at the world around you, quoting Gladwell. It may seem like an immovable, implacable place. It is not. With the slightest push in just the right place, it can be tipped. Everything is looking extremely fragile. The Republic of Kenya mandated Barclays, JP Morgan, Standard Bank and QNB Capital to arrange a series of fixed income investor meetings in the US and UK commencing on Thursday 5th June through June 15th for purposes of marketing its first Eurobond. Government of Kenya team is being led by the Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich, who were in San Francisco yesterday and Los Angeles on Friday. Sub-Saharan bond markets were a rising tide in 2012 and 2013, and it was the Republic of Rwanda which sold its $400 million bond last year into the sweetest of sweet spots. In 2014, the SSA sovereign bond market has bifurcated, with the market punishing Ghana and Zambia, who were seen as playing too fast and too loose. In North Africa, Egypt has seen its yields at its lowest level since December 2010. And I think, notwithstanding the spike in SSA issuance, demand significantly outpaces supply, and it's a secular medium-term allocation thing. I see Kenya going one time, and I think we'll go for $2 billion. My rate range is 6.95 to 7.5, but this is a moving target. Net new liquidity via the Euro bond will see the equity markets glide higher from here, in my opinion, and I think Friday should mark a bottom. Big cap stocks have continued to outperform in 2014 on robust international buy-side demand. Small caps have been another standout in an interesting development in 2014. Value stocks like Kenya Airways, Mumia Sugar, Uchumi, TPS Serena have seriously underperformed of late. Value stock valuations are egregious. And I shall leave it at that and wish you a great week. And once again, thank you for stopping by, for which I'm grateful.